All right, welcome to part two of our financial stress management mini series. And in this step, we're going to be looking at some of the impact in a person's life. So, kind of just going deeper into into the first part, and then some initial counseling interventions that would take with a client undergoing this type of stress. So, in that first meeting, we're going to go over whether it's the first or second or what have you, but moving as fast as the client would like. We're going to be looking over some of the root causes of their financial stress because it's different for everybody. So, whether it's job loss and you find yourself suddenly without a job, whether it's layoffs or perhaps a union strike, which I suppose you'd likely get back to the job, but maybe it's an interim period of a month or two of just unknown where money's coming from. If you find yourself like maybe it's a construction project and it's coming to an end, maybe in those situations you'd have a little bit more time to prepare financially or prepare mentally or both. But sometimes though it's where our expectations of where money's coming in abruptly end. Like in that construction example, maybe you thought there was already a project lined up for immediately after this one's done, and now the developer is saying we're actually going to delay it by 6 months because of the larger economic forces, and there might be a significant period of time there where there's not very much money coming in. We're going to look at your bills, whether it's medical bills, medical expenses, perhaps even a car accident, whether it's your fault or the other person's, and the insurance payout isn't enough to get another car or maybe a large enough car for what you need. And these just large unexpected bills, and even small unexpected bills, like a vet bill coming out of the blue, or perhaps there's you spill something on an expensive piece of equipment, and like a laptop, and you need, like, I know right now if I wrecked this laptop, my whole business would essentially shut down. And even thinking of it, it's a little nerve-wracking. I always watch the liquids around the laptop. Things like that, like if I don't plan to have to expect this or to replace this, but if it did happen, I'd almost be forced to, because I can't run this business without it. But then an extra $2,000 on business equipment that I expected to last for 5 years or so, that can really throw a wrench in things. And it's really these unexpected things are those two, or even they're expected, but what are you going to do? Not have a laptop, or if you need to travel to Vancouver for a life-saving surgery. These are things that you gotta do some way or another, and it might put you into debt to do it, even in an uncomfortable level of debt. And then there's also just poor budgeting habits in general. We're going to be looking at that, like what's the nature of your concerns. Poor budgeting habits might be taking yourself out for treats too much, just not even really knowing how much money is coming in and out. A lot of people get on autopilot. They get their bills set up automatically, their subscriptions, and they're just as long as the money's coming in, everything's okay. But then next thing you know, as soon as there's a break in that, and they're looking at their budget, or even, I guess in this case though, in this example, it's more so that it looks like there's more money coming in than not, or they're budgeting for, just their budget is incorrect, and after a period of time you can find yourself racking up debt and getting yourself into a hairy situation with the interest again. So we're going to be seeing that. So some of these things, like perhaps like a construction worker with a job loss or a temporary layoff, it might be, how am I going to manage the next 6 months? And that'll kind of influence where the conversation goes, if it's interim and there's a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. Now, if there's a series of large bills and you find yourself now strapped and the interest payments are so high that it's way over exceeding your budget, even if you're still able to work full time and your household incomes, it remains the same. But now you have this interest tacked onto it that is putting yourself in a deficit every month. That's when, some of these things, there's not necessarily as much a light at the end of the tunnel, at least initially. Poor budgeting habits are often, behavioral based, like they're needs based, but also there's sometimes a bit more room to wiggle there, and that's kind of where we, in that first section, getting into, really sitting down and what are needs and wants, and maybe if we have a bit lesser quality of life for the next 6 months to a year, well, still going, maybe you'll be able to find room to still go out once in a while and have a higher quality of life than you think you would be forced down to, and then get ourselves out of it and back on track and repaying debt and hopefully saving a little bit on the side as well. Some of these things are longer in nature, and it can appear like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Other people think that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and all these things can really affect just the nature of where the discussion goes. Even someone who thinks there's a light at the end of the tunnel, like a construction worker, and this applies to a lot of industries, but this construction worker job is on my mind. They might think to themselves, oh, everything's fine. I know I can last, even though this was unexpected, I have savings and the resources to last 6 months. But it's going to get down to the wire at the end of that 6 months. But they're pretty sure that it's going to be okay. And to a degree, they've planned correctly, but these things are uncontrollable. What if the developer says, oh, I know we said 6 months, but now it's going to be 8, or it's going to be 10, or a full year delay. And to a degree, it's almost counting your chickens before they hatch. And in these financial situations where you might have mortgage on the line, dependence, your own health, the quality of food that you eat on the line, it has a certain degree of, there's a more serious degree to the nature of some of these things. And so not counting all your chickens before they hatch, perhaps. And, if you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, there's things there that are still uncontrollable, and not maybe reducing your spending a little bit and taking away a little bit of your quality of life might extend that 6 months savings or resources to 8 months, 10 months, a year. So that way, if in fact it does get further delayed, it's not 6 months of the same quality of life and then just a dead stop. What are we doing now? And that can be very nerve-wracking. But that's where the conversations can go. So we're going to be assessing just what's the root cause for you? Where do you see it going? How do you see it progressing? Is there a light or not? And some people think that there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and after a conversation or two realize, oh wow, there is actual steps and behaviors I can take now that doesn't seem so doom and gloom that I'm going to be eating nothing but ramen with my family for the next 6 months. Things like this. So we're going to also explore some of the emotional impacts through open-ended questions from the root causes. And, we're going to be uncovering, is it mainly fear that you struggle with and this unknown, unpredictable nature of the job market you find yourself in? Or, we barely got through that, like a medical procedure, and like maybe a knee surgery or shoulder surgery, and we had enough at that time to scrape by, but now we're kind of starting back from ground zero. But maybe this person works in a job where injuries are higher likelihood than others, and it's, well, now if this happens again, we are on our last fumes, and I'm terrified of getting injured at work now. And it's on their mind so much that it might even make their likelihood of getting injured more high, where they're on edge and they're not able to relax into their job. There could be, exploring, like, is it, the guilt of this one, it often, well, you almost need to, you basically need it to apply to some social context to have guilt. But whether it's with a friend group, like we mentioned earlier about you know, maybe there's been a guy's trip planned and it's been 3 years in the making, and finally all the guys' schedules align, and you've been planning this to the nth degree for years, and everybody's looking forward to it, and now you're thinking, there's no way I can do that. Yeah, but now I'm going to be letting down these people, um, and whether that's true or not, that's up for debate. Um, and in a conversation like that, I'd be asking questions like, is that entirely true? Have you talked to your friends? Do they understand your situation? Um, is there any way it could be delayed? Like, what's really happening there? Like, does every party know your situation? Because normally, if they're good friends and you've been planning a trip for years like that, they're not going to want you to go on that at the expense of yourself or your family going without food or other needs, at the cost of a week or two trip. Most people are reasonable, especially good friends. But feeling so guilty that you're unable to have those conversations, that can be something to work on. And yeah, socially though, like feelings with guilt, like we've said before though, maybe you and your partner constructed this great life and this idea of a great life, and now you have to tell them, I don't think I can fulfill that promise right now. Our dream is being delayed. We're unable to buy a house. We got to keep renting and living in maybe a less than ideal living situation for longer, and feeling guilty or like a failure because of that. And then also, with kids, independence, and people that you're responsible for, telling a child of yours, you can't do this, you can't do that, and while this is entirely different, like kids don't always, and kids ought to not always get what they want all the time. There's got to be some lessons about responsibility, and perhaps in discussing with them, it could be a good lesson in household finances and money management inside of that. When you tell them, look, I know you're expecting to do this, and you've done this every year, a family trip or what have you, and I know you really like it down there, but this year we're not able to go. We're going to do a staycation, or we're just going to do something special for a day or a weekend or something, rather. It can feel very guilty, and evoke feelings of shame, like you've let other people down. So these are also getting to the root of, because normally there's a general reason or like an event, and then your thoughts about that event will bring up whether fear, guilt, shame, or often it's a combination of all these things to varying degrees. But really finding the one that there's normally one that's more one or two that are more prominent than the others. Maybe it's fear and shame, as opposed to sadness, or it might be extremely sad and very angry. It's just, but that again, these are things that you get into with conversation as the conversation kind of flows, as as I get to know you a little bit more and the nature of your disturbances. We're going to look at your whole life, about how it affects your mental health. So kind of your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions, your relationships, and your daily functioning. So do you sign up that hobby that you love, like jujitsu or hockey, baseball? They normally all have a cost in some way or another. Because we've already kind of touched on mental health, relationships, but daily functioning and just your habits and how you go about the day, whether it's your sleep quality, the food, like your appetite, your ability to go to the gym and decompress a little bit, or whatever hobby or activity you do that helps you de-stress. Sometimes, often, a lot of them cost money, like aside from going for a walk or a run. Maybe if you have a gym in your apartment or something, you're still able to do some things, but a lot of hobbies require money, and if money is the root of it, you might find yourself not doing those as often, which can, in some ways, it might align with you know, you don't have to do these hobbies to survive with a roof, with food, shelter, and such. But they might also provide a lot of stress relief, socialization opportunities, um, and when they go away, it might it's something to be that's something that it's so dependent on the person. Like spending $200 to go to jujitsu or whatever hobby you have a month. That stress reduction might then help you be more capable of handling the financial stress that you're going through and actually be a net positive on your finances if you're able to then keep going through and figure it out in time. But if but it's such a fine line, because if you're looking at interest payments, and now the interest payments, and if you were to cut out a couple $100, then you might not see such a detraction from your quality of life. And that might be a very valid option for you to do for 6 months or a year, and once you get out of this situation that you're in. Yeah, things like sleep, we've already touched on a little bit, but sleep is so important. And if your mind is racing every night and you're tossing and turning, then over a period of time, even a single night of poor sleep, let alone weeks or months of that, can just strip you of a lot of your ability to think rationally and productively about this, to manage your emotions and thoughts throughout the day, to keep going to work, to socialize where you're able to, and just really be yourself and enjoy a quality of life. So that, yeah, there's going to be just like looking at your daily functioning, how this financial stress is showing up in your life. We're going to look at then the patterns of financial stress and how it shows up for you. So how it links to that depression. And again, all these things, all these points tie together to one degree or another. But so we've already mentioned a lot of them. I don't want to kind of beat a dead horse to death here. But once we see a pattern, and once we start to look for some patterns and we're able to acknowledge them, again, it's almost a further deepening of knowing is half the battle. If you know that you're stressed out and you've gone through your budget, and I believe that that's one of the next steps, or in the next section here. And you know, if you were to simply cut out $200 to $500 a month of wants, you'd be okay, and you'd be able to pull out of it and pay off the interest and start on a good trajectory again. And you know that there's a Friday outing every Friday. Well, just even thinking about it and the social implications of it and being around those people, maybe that's a stressor or a trigger to this pattern of thought that you go into work and every Thursday people start planning, where are we going tomorrow? And normally you'd be a part of those conversations, and it's coming up, and as soon as that conversation's over, you're going to be sitting at your desk for an hour or two, really unable to focus, and that's how it shows up in your life. Well, then, avoidance and distraction, they have their time and place, but then we can look at options like, do you avoid those conversations altogether? If that sounds good to you, then that's certainly an option. Or is it that you mention it to someone, if you're good friends with these coworkers and you think they'd understand, saying, hey, like, look, I gotta make some cuts, and I can't wait to come out with you guys again in 3 months, but this is what it has to be for now. But even saying that to people, that's where some people get bogged down, and it's a shame there, guilt, frustration. Or maybe you think, you know what, that's that $30 on lunch, which is kind of crazy. When I was growing up, it was that's not too long ago. That was, you could get a piece of pizza and a pop for $6, and now I bet even something simple like that is probably closer to 10. But if you want to get some, like, a higher quality food item, like maybe going to Subway or just out to a actual restaurant, you're talking $20, $25, even $30. And so yeah, that's where you know, recognizing the patterns and kind of what proceed, like, is there like the activating event that's going to more likely trigger it than not, how it follows, just recognizing those. That's what we're going to look for as well. We're going to look for how it links to these anxious, depressive, shameful, frustrating thoughts. And then maybe there's things there that, well, there normally is things there that can be worked on. If you're saying to yourself, I can't tell my coworkers, I can't handle the embarrassment. Well, is that true? Like, is it true? Because what's the other option? To not say anything, or to say something and to say it with grace that kind of still retains some of your dignity? Is that an option? Is there truly nothing you could say in that situation that would help you in some way, or something you could do? Even if it's looking at your budget elsewhere and thinking, okay, if I can, maybe you'd be more willing to take out, to maybe in that case, like we've talked about in other examples, you'd be more willing to take out breakfast, or something like maybe you get like pre-made protein bars, and those are like a little expensive per unit of protein, and switch to the powder, and maybe right there you'd find enough money to then go out for lunch and just keep like looking for things. But sometimes people can just get stuck in one spot and think that there's no possible way that's doable. I can't do it. I should never have to say no to going out to eat on Fridays or what have you. And again, though, in that example, like, this is just superficial, off the cuff thoughts. Like, it can be a lot more serious cutbacks than a $30 lunch. But maybe finding $10, $30 lunch like things a month might net you $300, which might help a lot with your interest rate. Little things like that. So it's just like a little mini example. We are then going to, once we kind of find some of these, so we're looking at your, the nature of it, where it's coming from, the emotional impacts, how it affects your life, then looking for patterns of when it presents and how it shows up. Then we're going to look at some short-term goals. So it could be tracking spending triggers, like going out for lunch. There might be support networks out there where like maybe you notice not everybody at work goes to lunch every Friday, and maybe there's a few people that stay behind, and you still want that social time, but you don't want to be spending as much, so you bring a bagged lunch, or bring your lunch from home, and you have a little bit of a social group for a few months, and who knows what could happen there. Maybe you meet someone, maybe those people are going through something very similar to yourself, or they're more frugal and have some strategies they could talk to you about. And I don't say frugal at all as a demerit to the person. Like, I personally can't stand spending $30 on lunch, so I almost always bring my own lunch. But I'll still go out now and then. Like little things you can do, like tracking spending triggers. So Friday lunch. Maybe it's every time your kid has sports, you always give $5 or $10 to the 50-50 raffle, or as a donation. And if you have 2 or 3 kids and they're playing sports every weekend, well, there's $15, $20, $30 every week to like going out for that. And maybe there's a lot of shame there, where if I stop doing this, I'm going to be seen as cheap, or that I don't care about youth sports. So there's things to look for, like looking at these spending triggers where money's going out, and it's not necessarily on the needs of food, shelter, clothing, gas, like your means to get to work and whatnot. And then looking at support networks. So all around the community, there's normally things, and I'll link to some of these below once I put this on into the description. But there's often help for people that are looking for financial assistance, and in a social manner. You can look online. There's online forums where there's probably someone out there going through a very similar situation and they've asked a question, or you could ask a question yourself to some of these groups. Online is coming up right off the cuff because I haven't done the research yet to see, but I'll link some of those below. And really what we're doing though is like empowering the client early on, looking for these triggers, some groups, some actionable steps they can take. And then, and kind of in line with that though, like referring to resources. So this could be going to your bank. Here in Canada, we're lucky where I know in the States there's like a bazillion different banks and small banks for each town and such. But here, really there's just the big five, maybe big six, and there's a couple online only options. And but they all have financial advisors offered for free to their clients. There's credit unions. There's a lot of options, but getting the ball rolling and starting that conversation with someone who knows a lot more in depth about specifically money and the flow of money. And like my role as a financial stress counselor, we can do budgeting together and looking at spending and all these things, but when it comes to actually looking at your cash flow of you as an individual or your household, these things are often best helped by the experts who have dedicated their lives and careers to studying these types of things. And they can also they might have even more resources for you at hand that you can go to or access. So really this like finding some initial steps, setting up a meeting. What are you going to say at that meeting with this individual? Is shame coming up when you go to the financial advisor? Is that what's holding you back from that meeting? Is it from maybe you have a shared bank account with your spouse and your spouse doesn't know about it yet, so how are you going to, but you both have the account, so you both kind of should be in that meeting, and maybe you need both of you in that meeting to sign off on certain things, whether it's debt consolidation or agreement to new debt terms or what have you, and that person doesn't know yet that this is the situation. And so it can kind of all cascade together. You can see how people can get quagmired a bit there. With that said though, that is the end of our part 2 here on just some assessing the impact and some initial counseling interventions. And they aren't even necessarily outright counseling interventions, but this is how I, as a financial stress counselor, would address some of these things right off the cuff and get the ball rolling on some actionable behaviors for the client. And again, it's extremely dependent on the person, because if someone's coming in and they think it's just going to be a 4-month interim thing, it might be, and they're pretty confident and they have the savings to last for a year, but they're still kind of stressed or upset that that's going to delay them buying a house or a new car that they need by a few months. That can make the conversation entirely different than if it's this huge thing that's grown into this unmanageable debt and it's gone to the last minute, and now they have to tell their spouse and their children that there's a sudden and sharp detraction from their quality of life coming down the pipeline, and what are we going to do about it? Those two conversations can be just quite different, but at the same time, they're conversations that need to be had, and there is hope. All you have to do is ask, and there's things out there and people out there that are willing to help and have these conversations with you. But with that said, not to beat a dead horse to death, but so in part 3 we're going to be going over some further actionable steps to alleviate financial stress. Thanks for listening.